Hello, welcome to another Pursuing God's Heart Yourself series. We're going to be working our way through, this time, the book of Jonah. Short book, 48 verses. And so I'd encourage you, read it as many times as you possibly can. The more you read it, the better it will get. And what we're going to do in the videos is work through 7 principles that will be useful wherever you are. We'll focus on one section of Jonah and we'll take one principle just to highlight it. But in reality, as you read through the whole book, you could read through the whole book with one principle in mind and then read through it again with the next one in mind. It takes minutes to read the book. So that might be a very good strategy to take. So let's start then with the first principle, which is that the Word of God is about God. The Bible is primarily about Him. He's revealing Himself to us. And so ultimately, while you're reading it, you may discover all sorts of things about yourself. It will point you to yourself in various ways, but primarily it's going to be revealing God to us. Okay, so here we are, the first few verses of Jonah chapter 1. And look what it tells us about God. It says, first of all, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying. So we've immediately got a sense that God is the initiator. He's the one that's launched this story. He's the one that comes to Jonah. And when he does so, he comes and gives 3 commands. Arise, go to Nineveh, and call out against it. It's kind of a 1, 2, 3 instructions for Jonah. So what does Jonah do? He arose, there's number 1, and he went in the other direction. He arose, he went the wrong way, he fled to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, went down to Joppa, found a ship, going to Tarshish, paid the fare, went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. So the book is wanting us to see this, the presence of the Lord, away from the presence of the Lord. It's repeating that Jonah somehow in his mind thinks that if he can get far enough away, then he can in some way put himself out of commission for this instruction up here that he's just not a fan of. He does not want to go to Nineveh and he does not want to call out against it. And so God has initiated. Now his prophet has rebelled. What is God going to do? Come to verse 4. The Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. God is active and he is pursuing, he is responding. He is not letting Jonah dictate the terms of this story. So the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. The mariners were afraid. Each of them cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo. So God's hurled this wind. Now they're hurling the cargo into the sea, trying to lighten it. The captain comes down and he finds Jonah in the depth of the sea. Maybe as they were throwing the cargo out, they revealed Jonah down at the bottom of the cargo hold, and he's fast asleep. And the captain says, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." Perhaps the God, clearly this man does not know the God of Jonah. This is not a Jew. This is some non-Jewish pagan sailor. And yet he's saying, look, maybe there's hope. Maybe the hope lies with your God. He's actually speaking probably better than he knows. But notice one detail here. When God called Jonah, he said to him, arise, go to Nineveh and cry out against it, call out against it. 3 commands, right? That was the 3-part instruction. Jonah arose and he went in the opposite direction. And yet that's not the end of God's involvement. God is pursuing him. And now, as Jonah's asleep, probably sleeping that kind of guilty, I'd rather be asleep than facing my own kind of sense of conviction. But he's fast asleep and he's, maybe the dreams, turmoil in his head. Maybe he's remembering the call, arise, go to Nineveh, cry out, arise, go to Nineveh, cry out. And here he's hearing the captain speaking to him, kind of shaking him awake, arise, call out to your God. Commands 1 and 3. Again, on the lips of this pagan, God is still involved here. God is bringing back to Jonah what it is that Jonah thinks he's running away from. And so all the way through this, we're going to see all sorts of different details, but all the way through the story of Jonah, we get to see God, a God who initiates, a God who's in charge. He's in charge of the wind. We're going to see that he's in charge of fish, arrival, timings, all sorts of details. God is in charge and God is at work. He is mercifully pursuing Jonah. We're going to see that this book paints a picture of God that is absolutely wonderful for us to ponder and to think about. A God who initiates, a God who's got a plan, a God who is able to follow through on that plan, a God who is in charge of all the details, and a God who ultimately does not let us go. Even when we run away, he pursues. And so I'd encourage you, read through Jonah and see what it has to say about God. What does Jonah, this little 48 verse book, say about the God that reveals himself to us in the Bible?